The West Asia crisis is entering a phase where diplomacy is stalling. Now, the issue in front of us is that did Donald Trump miss a crucial off-ramp when Iran signaled that the Strait of Hormuz would remain open? Why did Trump suddenly have to say that the strait would remain blocked? Now, Washington's language has hardened. There is no clarity whether the Iranians are going to be in Islamabad or not. So, on this issue, I am joined by former External Affairs Minister MJ Akbar. Sir, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Karthik.
Without wasting any time, let me straight away ask you, sir, do you think in your assessment that Trump missed the off-ramp which the Iranians offered Americans by saying that the Strait of Hormuz is open?
You know, all this while, there's been one pattern to these whole negotiations. Confusion is being used as strategy by Washington and by President Trump. His language is always off kilter, as we all know, but he uses sometimes unconsciously and sometimes deliberately. It's provocative. But the important point, I think, where we have reached is that both sides now, Iran in slightly more sophisticated language, are using brinkmanship as a tactic in this process. Who blinks first? But you know, in this process, if you do brinkmanship too far, who knows who will fall off the edge? And falling off the edge can land you in a very, very toxic ravine at this moment. This is not the kind of negotiation process that we have seen. I think we have watched, at least in West Asia, very consciously the negotiating process after the 1973 war, which led to the Camp David Accords, but they took 5 years, 6 years before the process and Camp David was eventually reached. And even in the last phase, with very towering figures like Menachem Begin on the Israeli side and Anwar Sadat on the Egyptian side, even that took about 15 days of continuous dialogue and in a much more congenial atmosphere, an atmosphere that was not vitiated by violence as it is at this moment. Passions are very, very high. The waters are very, very deep and oil is very, very thick on the waters. It's a very, very inflammatory and volatile situation. But the people playing this high-stakes game are perhaps aware of what they're doing. If you look at collateral evidence, and it's very interesting if you look at collateral evidence and watch how the markets are behaving, and indeed how the betting markets are behaving, then they too now, the pattern is that they too have become extremely uncertain about what the consequences are. I mean, in a very practical interpretation of whether talks will happen tomorrow or not, we can sort of wait till the edge of time. But the Americans have to leave on Monday in order to reach Iran on Tuesday. Iranians, in order to Islamabad on Tuesday, Iranians have to take just a half-an-hour flight. So we don't know till the very end whether the talks will happen or not. But, I mean, the consequences of war returning to the region, particularly with Israel very, very determined to find some way back into the conflict. One of the things which the world is not actually giving enough recognition to is that the war was started by America and Israel as partners. But Israel is not a partner of the peace process. Israel is not on the table in Islamabad. And that says something very significant. But it also says that Israel can be, in these circumstances, the agent of continued volatility.
So, tackling this issue, a study has come out that the 58% of Gaza is somewhat now under control of Israel, direct or indirect. They have expanded their bases to the river Litani. They have taken over areas east of the Golan Heights. And what they have done in Lebanon is almost a repeat of 1985-2000. So what did work in 1985 to 2000 How are they so confident that it is going to work? Even if I recognize that it's very difficult to demilitarize Hezbollah.
Oh, it's very difficult to demilitarize. I think the latest that Hamas, by the way, in Gaza has done is to offer some as part of its weapons. But I think that's talk. Nobody is going to de-weaponize. Nobody is going to disarm in such a situation. Prime Minister Netanyahu's dream of a greater Israel, which will have expanded territory. You must remember that you mentioned Golan Heights. Golan Heights was part of Syria in 1967, and it was taken. It has never been returned. If in 1973 the Egyptians had not won back the Sinai with with a military attack, Sinai might still. I mean, half of Egypt, quarter of Egypt might still be with Israel. So I think the gains made by war very often can only be reversed by war. As somebody pointed out, I think very perspicaciously, nobody has won a war in West Asia for the last 3,000, whatever it is, years, 2,000 years. So peace is an extremely difficult. All that we can hope for is some kind of a ceasefire in which we can rebuild. But one thing I can say confidently about Iran will not rest and will not accept an end to conflict unless it can return to status quo ante.
Sir, I remember one of your inaugural speeches 11 years ago, where in context of India, you described Pakistan as an alcoholic brother. So keeping that line in mind, it looks like Asif Munir is doing pretty well for himself.
Well, Asif Munir is doing well because of in a given circumstance. I think two reasons for that. One, that his proximity with the Pentagon, and the fact that he's probably the leader of the only nation in the region whom trust believes is obedient enough to the American interests. That would be one major factor. Second, I think I go back. Pakistan is the only country where Israel cannot sit on the table. So that may be another reason for using Pakistan as the venue for these conversations. But the real conversation, I say and I repeat, is between Iran and America. Yes. Eventually, it is these two powers which will have to find some kind of a modicum, some kind of a bridge by which they can get back to status quo ante. I think the rest are comparatively, not exclusive, but comparatively irrelevant. Certainly, Pakistan is getting mileage out of its role at the present. And by the way, the quote that he used, I don't remember saying alcoholic country, but what I do say, and I still maintain, and I have written a book on the subject, Pakistan is essentially a jelly state. What is a jelly state? A state that will neither disappear nor ever become stable. But like jelly, it will continue to quiver. Butter melts, jelly doesn't melt in any weather. But it will continue to quiver, and because it has nuclear power, and because it has a history of actually supporting, financing, arming, and exporting terrorist groups. It's a very, very toxic jelly state.
So, sir,
but Pakistan generals always believe they have America on their back, and that is the situation we are seeing now.
So what is the Indian challenge in all of this?
The Indian challenge is, I think, to protect, one, primarily India's interests. India's interests in the region are very, very vital, very strong. I think if you noticed at this moment, NSA, Ajit Doval, yes, is in Saudi Arabia, and he's there in order to protect and expand and, maintain India's interests in the region, in a country with which we have very good relations. I know Saudi Arabia has entered into a military pact with Pakistan. Pakistani troops are in Saudi Arabia at this moment. But despite that, I think the NSA's credibility in the region and with Saudi is so strong and so high, and he represents Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister Modi's own credibility with the Saudis and in the Gulf is very strong. So on that bridge, I think India's interests are being protected, even as we talk, very vital interests. And India, of course, I mean, sometimes it is not very wise to rush into the fog of war because who knows, where you might reach in a fog.
So in our previous conversation, you cited three issues. One, fissile material. Second, the Strait of Hormuz, the security. And the fourth you mentioned was sanctions, including defreezing of the assets. There has been no neither narrative or conversation or movement on this. Why? Or is it something which is happening, behind the curtain? There's no reportage on any of it.
Yes, because I mean, so much of reportage is now controlled. I'm sorry, by social truth, sound bites, and by statements that the tough work of finding solutions and resolutions, even working resolutions on these very, very difficult subjects. But here I can actually tell you that as far as Hormuz Straits are concerned, it is the easiest thing to do. Don't ever forget that the Hormuz Straits were free, open for international shipping before Israel and America launched their invasion. So for Iran to go back to that status is not at all a problem. The others in this war, Iran's frozen assets. For Iran, it's a very huge problem. There are billions and billions of dollars involved, including in the Gulf. And Iran has a claim on that. And Iran believes, as their speaker said, that it has achieved a military victory on the ground. Now, of course, victory might be too strong a word, but I'm looking at it from the Iranian perspective. And so they believe that they should get their frozen assets back. And maybe that will be a form of the reparation that they are seeking. And the third, of course, the sanctions being lifted. That has been a long-term Iranian demand. And if after as corrosive a war as this, Iran is not brought back into the status of, let us say, a normal nation in world affairs, then I think the Iranians will find it very difficult to sell any such peace deal, not just with the Iranian people, but also with the powerful interests that are there in the Iranian governing establishment.
And last question,
We
sir.
must not.
Before please complete your.
Yeah, you must not forget that the Iranian establishment also is split into a military zone, which is very hardline. Its military forces are also split into Al-Quds and into the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and so on. So the leadership of Iran in a war situation is not necessarily, everybody speaking with the same voice. And these have to be managed, as anyone at the negotiating table should know. And I assume Pakistan, which understands Iran, I hope, would also know this.
This was my last question. Were you surprised at the fact that IRGC actually consolidated itself because of the war and becoming even the more powerful faction within the Iranian state?
Well, the IRGC is the one force which is going to fight a land invasion if it ever takes place. It is the one, its missile units are the one which are handling a very major air assault and invasion. They have also proved they have hit each American base in the region. They have destroyed the security architecture of the region. They have reduced American credibility within the region. We already know today that UAE has already started making noises that its future security may not be necessarily synonymous with the American interpretation of their security, which so far was taken for granted by the whole of the Gulf. So we are going to see a very, very new world in this region. And I think India's role is going to be very important in the new dynamics that will quickly come into play the moment these talks either fail or succeed. If they fail, then we are heading towards dangerous conflagration. If they succeed, we are still in very great danger zone because the reorganization of the region is going to be extremely complex.
Thank you.